Hi friends, this is Kapun Piso, giving you a lesson about Mormon Christ Psychosis. The United States of America is infected with Christ Psychosis and since the 1600s, and since the Pilgrims and the Puritans arrived, 1620, 1629. And they all influence the way the land was going to be divided and the way the laws were going to be enforced and everything. All Christ Psychosis in the name of zombie Jesus. But here I'm going to talk about Mormonism. How Mormons influence the division and the land, the promised land of Utah. That, by the way, it belonged to Mexico. And then they got out of the United States to practice their Christ Psychosis of Mormonism in that area there, and 1840s. And all of a sudden, the Mexican-American War made Mexico give the United States, give the territories. That was immense. And that territory comprised Utah, or no, well, the territory that was huge, immense. So now the Mormons were part of the United States. The nuts. And you know, the whole thing started with Joseph Smith ingesting entheogens, psychotropic substances, and saw an angel. And his father was a Christian. So they're all Christian people. A different version, but they're all Christians. So somebody says they're a cult, they're very stupid. They're Christian. They just have a different fairy tale belief. You know, they include an angel, magic golden plates, and a civilization in America, and all that. You know, fantasy. Because of the ingestion of entheogens.
How Utah was shaped by religion, you have to understand the people behind the religion. Buying camping gear. They're shopping for Armageddon.
See?
Mormons are taught to store enough emergency supplies to survive the worst kinds of calamities.
See that?
Being able to provide for yourself, whether it be natural disaster or whether it be financial hiccups, it's really pretty much a commandment for us to be prepared in these types of ways.
Religious psychosis.
This in early Mormon teachings, which instruct church members to prepare for Armageddon and the...
See, all Christ psychotics, they believe in this second coming. Like many religious psychoses, they all have the hero coming back. They all do. Greek mythology, you know, Persian mythology, Egyptian mythology, they also always the resurrection, the God is coming back. Always happens. So they're so different with the Mormon Christ psychotics, because, you know, Christ is a redeemer, a savior, you know, and a spiritual thing, a hero. And naturally, psychosis is a form of mental illness in which the brain cannot tell between fact and fiction. You can take some entheogens and you become psychotic. Somebody hits you with the head, you become psychotic. You don't have enough oxygen in your brain, or you high temperature can produce also a psychosis, and brain operation, trauma, and all that psychosis. So it's just, you know, people that believe in God are simply psychotic. But this is what happened to the Mormons. You know, Joseph Smith, you know, ingesting all these entheogens, and of course, creating that. His father was also a Christian, senior, Joseph Smith Senior, but he also interesting that he was also a Mason. He joined the Mason, just like where George Washington was also a Mason. Because there's more fantasies of the temple in Jerusalem and Solomon and all the nonsense. So they add more fantasies and fairy tales to the already Christ psychotic fairy tales they already have. So it's very convoluted. Science fiction galore. but in the 1820s. So, of course, and then if you take some drugs, oh boy, then you really see God and talk to him and all that. So this is exactly what happened. And interesting about it is that since they were shunned by all the other Christian Christ Psychotics, they left Palmyra in New York, upstate New York. And of course, they took off and went into, get out of the United States, into a territory that belonged to actually Mexico, and finally got to the Promised Land, and they established Salt Lake City and so forth. That's what happened. A kingdom of Christ, zombie Jesus, on this area, which became United States much later. Interesting. But they call it Deseret because all religions have a book of fairy tales to follow, like Greek mythology. There are, thousands of Bibles, thousands of, Qurans and Talmuds and all that. Fairy tales, Winnie the Pooh, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, Santa, Mother Goose, and all that tales that please the children, and the children believe they're all real. Remember, we're in the 21st century. We create all this nonsense with the brain.
They are raised with a survivalist attitude, and for good reason. It was a wasteland when they settled here in 1847, but it was men started in New York. As they grew, they headed west, but their clannishness got them in trouble.
We must realize that, as in any neurological disorder, religious beliefs are based on bizarre mathematical beliefs in magic. Fairy tales, accepted as reality because of weak brains. So in this case of the Mormons, they blended everything. They have polygamy. You have many wives, and they can be 12 years old. Like in ancient times, you pick up a wife when they was 14. When the girl is ready to breed, she's a woman, and she can be actually inducted into to become a wife. And there are many harems and all that, and they adopted all these beliefs on the Book of Mormon because of the angel told them all this, and Moroni, and so forth. So they adopted that, and they're at odds with the other Christ Psychotics, the other fundamentalist Christians. There are so many different types. So they had to leave. And they wanted to, go with Brigham Young was the one that decided, because eventually they found a little town named Nouveau. The Mormons did. Close to, by Detroit, I don't know, St. Louis, I believe it is, something like that, Missouri, So anyway, and then from there, and then of course, Joseph Smith and his brother, they put in jail, and people are really, the other Christians, the other Christ Psychotics were upset at them and ended up killing them. They tried to escape from prison, so they became a martyr. So Brigham Young became the leader, or the Pope, and he started guiding all these people in this to look for the Promised Land. That's when they end up getting into Utah, getting away from the United States and crossing into Mexico. But now you can see that every religion, just splits. There's a split because everybody have their own ideas, and that you have presently Warren Jeffs, molesting all these, 12-year-old girls, calling his wife, how many wives, which still happens today, polygamy. So, hey, that's religious psychosis for you. Christ psychosis. Different types, different varieties, different flavors of the insanity. It's like there's many variations of schizophrenia. Craziness.
And to cross-examine witnesses?
It's a Christ Psychotic. He doesn't know. It's like a schizophrenia.
Well, he hasn't cross-examined anyone yet, and there's been 9 witnesses.
Problem with his brain. What do you expect?
Because he believes, he says he gets revelation from God. He says he's a prophet on earth. And he told the jury during this hour diatribe that he was a prophet, that Joseph Smith, Mormon theology teaches. He was given a Mormon theology lesson, was what he was doing. But
Feels psychotic, the man is.
Do next, and that's he was like a petulant child actually just now when he kept interrupting the prosecutor.
He's crazy.
Please stop interrupting the prosecutor.
But he's crazy. Don't you understand? It's like a schizophrenic.
What's going to happen next? Himself in this trial, which could put him in prison for life if he's found guilty.
See that?
On the one hand, the fact that
the man is crazy.
Anyone could speed it along, but if
he's a Christ psychotic infected with Mormon Christ psychosis.
So what do you think?
And all of this faith happens because of a defective brain, infected with Christ psychosis or religious virus. It's a malfunction of the brain that makes you, accept. All religions are like that. But they all started with the ingestion of entheogens, which is psychotropic substances. I mean, everything I say, I can prove. I have the evidence. I can prove it to you. I can give you psychotropic substances. I can, operate the brain or do something with your brain, and like they say, a lobotomy will cure you from Christianity. You will never believe in Christ after I give you a lobotomy. Just manipulate the frontal lobes, and you'll see what happens. Modern lobotomy. In other words, just remove certain areas. Christ who? Allah who? Demon who? Satan who? So this will happen. But all religions are created by the ingestion of entheogens, psychotropics. So like mushrooms and all that. As you can see here, that's where the Mormon religion began. Mormon Christ psychosis. Yes, it is Christianity. Look. Take one of these, and you'll see God. Here we have Amanita muscaria mushrooms, like the apples of Apollo, the Garden of Eden, with the apple given by Eve and the demon. They were nourishing by mushrooms. There are many varieties, and there are roots, and there are all kinds. This is Datura flowers, which is, was used in ancient Rome to see gods, and also by the Native Americans, and also the Mormons. And of course, this is something that everybody ignores. Nobody sees. Atheists, educated, scholars, intellectuals, they never see it. I'm going to repeat it again. Once more. We are product of a fuck, evolved, mutated primates that create bizarre, mythological beliefs of God and all this nonsense with our brains. When the brain malfunctions, it creates gods and all this, accepts them as reality. And, of course, this religion started by primitive men 40,000 years ago ingesting entheogens. The evidence is overwhelming. It's right there. Because remember, we produce thoughts with the brain. Thoughts are not picked up by our brains from God, like a radio picks up waves. It doesn't happen. The brain itself produces it. It's like when you take a shit. If you take a shit, in the moment that came out from the sphincter, it comes out into the ground. With the contact with air, it starts oxidizing. And there are more bacteria reproducing and all this, and flies come around, and it starts stinking. So what happens? Do you take a shit, and it doesn't stink at all, but it actually picks up the smell from something else? No, it doesn't happen like that. So this is what the people that are infected with religious beliefs, spirituality, are people that have either are very ignorant, or they have a problem, a cognitive dissonance, a problem with their brains, a genetic malfunction, a defective gene, which also, by the way, there's a defective gene that produces a schizophrenia. So that's exactly what happens. People don't realize that. Come on, we're in the 21st century.
Polygamy. The Mormons had a great deal of difficulty getting along with their neighbors and vice versa across the Midwest, until finally they decided they would not be safe in the United States at all. Mormons fled the country to find a safe haven in Mexico.
They established their colony, their city, in what other people would have called the most God-forsaken place, precisely. And precisely because it was outside the United States. It was beyond American jurisdiction.
1848, the U.S. wins the Mexican War and gains Mexico's northern territory, including the Mormon settlement around Salt Lake. Back in the U.S., tried to form their own state called Deseret. It's 4 times the size of present-day Utah.
Comes from the Book of Mormon, so a religious text for the Mormons simply means honeybee, and it signifies industry, the same way that bees work together to build a hive.
Congress renames Deseret Utah after the Ute Indians. The new smaller than the Mormons planned, but Congress goes even further.
Congress doing one of two things or doing both. One is cutting this Mormon state down smaller and smaller because they feared the loyalty of the Mormons to federal.
Don't forget, in the 1850s, 1840s, the United States was plagued by a bunch of different versions, strains of the Christ Psychosis infection. In other words, you have the Puritan Christians, the Pilgrims, and they composed all this, and then the Church of England, of course, and all that was supposed to be aristocratic at the top, because remember, the Queen of England is the grand Christ Psychosis, psychotic of them all, because it's anointed by Christ directly, and they started with Henry VIII. So if you're an Episcopalian, a Church of England, you're upper class. Your shit doesn't stink. And then you find the Catholic psychotic with practical Spain was like that. So you have this problem. So of course, the United States, the government was Christ psychotic from a mixture of crazy people. They all. They had the fundamentalists, all these crazy Baptists and all these Masonic lodges, and all involved with the Christian. I mean, these people are completely nuts. You can see that on the Christ psychotic President Polk. He was a criminal, He stole all the territories from Mexico. He took all the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. I mean, he wiped all the poor Mexicans down because it was a lower country, because they wanted to buy California. And the Mexicans, no, we don't want, no. And they were all Spanish Catholic. Well, guess what? He keep, and then the Spanish, the Mexican-American War, and this piece of shit criminal, Polk, it's a disgusting man. And the Americans try to ignore it. They never teach about this Christ psychotic imbecile president, a despicable, immoral Christian man. And he is the one that actually manipulated everything to invade Poco to the Mexicans and all that. And, hey, there was no government in Mexico at all. They invaded Mexico like the United States tried to invade everything and go to places that don't belong and take what they want. And that's the reason that's the reason we as Americans, United States of Americans, because I love this country, are hated all over the world. Because we have a bunch of ignoramus, Christ psychotic imbeciles running the United States of America. Now we have an atheist, Obama, which is great. But look at the fight he's getting. But anyways, this has been the problem in history. And of course, the Mexicans gave up all the territories. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and gave all the huge territories, and that included, of course, Utah and all that. That's exactly what happened. And the gravest problem in this wonderful country of ours is education not given to the people. They are all infected with Christ psychosis, with Christianity, resurrecting zombies, nonsense. It is disgusting. They molested children, the children's brain with this stupid education in this country. And this is the problem. They should shut down all the churches. These people are despicable, immoral, and perverts. They pervert the brain of children. And they should tell them the truth, down-to-earth truth. You think, create thoughts, and learn with the brain. There is no God, there is no angels, there is no demons, there is no demonic possession, and none of that bullshit. All the conspiracy theories are the result of this Christ Psychosis nonsense. This is the problem. We're in the 21st century. We're not in the 12th. And everybody's going to pass us, especially China. Just watch. China is going to be way above us because they have one child per family. United States and the rest of the Christ psychotic infect the world, reproduce and fuck and have a good time and don't give a shit because God is all, there's no global warming or nothing. This is anti-science ignoramuses, these Christians in government of the United States. They are morons. They are imbeciles. They have no idea of the science of the world, geography. Nothing. They are imbeciles. They speak barely English. You know, to be president of the United States and to be in government, you should at least be required to speak 3 languages and have a master's degree. That should be mandatory. And no, we have a bunch of ignoramus morons running the country. They're all Christ psychotics. And this is the problem in the United States of America. And of course, now that's the reason they say that Mormonism is a cult. Oh, God. Cults started first. And then a bunch of cults create religion all over the world for 40,000 years ago. All from the brain. Hey, ingest some mushrooms, or Amanita muscaria, or any of those entheogens, and you will create a religion. You will even write an old Bible. You even talk to gods and see the spirits. I hope you enjoy this. Pachi the Orb.